Hello, hi everyone. Very good afternoon, and welcome to our week 4 of Stand Up for Nuclear Malaysia session. And it's me again, Boon Hui from Critical Mass. How is everyone? Hope you're enjoying your Saturday so far, and thank you so much to you all for religiously following and attending our weekly Facebook live session. So, in case this is the first time you join our event, allow me to introduce who we are. Critical Mass, we are a group of Malaysians who strongly believe that every solution on the table should be used to address the climate emergency that we are now facing. We are Malaysians who advocate for informed policy making on energy based on science. We are Malaysians who are passionate about rethinking the role of nuclear energy in realizing a sustainable and low carbon future for the nations. And we are Critical Mass. Okay, so if you look at our poster, you will see a yellow round shaped logo, okay, on the right hand side. So this yellow logo represents Stand Up for Nuclear, or known as SUFN. It is an international pro-nuclear movement happening throughout the month of September, advocating for the safe use of nuclear energy. So actually what Critical Mass is doing right now in this month is in the conjunction of Stand Up for Nuclear. Okay. So as I mentioned before, this is a week 4, and this is our last series for Stand Up for Nuclear Malaysia 2021. Okay, so please allow me to recap what we have introduced, or what we have explained so far. Okay, in week 1, we talked about unclear nuclear. We have Dr. Asrudi and Ikwan explaining what radiation is and the difference between nuclear weapon and nuclear power. We also talk about the misperception on nuclear accidents and also nuclear waste. Okay, so that's what happened in week 1. Sorry. So in week 2, we invited Mr. Dana and also Myra to share the journey of Malaysia nuclear power corporations and the work they have done in realizing the dreams of Malaysia's first nuclear power plant. And last week, we have Dr. Julia from Agency Nuclear Malaysia and also Dr. Faiza from UKM to share their stories and journeys in nuclear industry. Right? So all our previous Facebook events are recorded, and you can watch it again on our Facebook page as well as on YouTube. Okay, so let's say that if you still have doubts on the safety aspect of a nuclear power plant, you have concern on nuclear meltdowns, all these are addressed in our week 1 event, in which you can rewatch it again. Or if you think that the nuclear industry is dominated by the mills, you can watch our week 2 and week 3 recordings, in which we have 2 female panelists, Myra and Dr. Julia, to share the involvement and achievement of women in nuclear industry. Okay? So if you have been following us for the past 3 weeks, you should probably aware that Malaysia has already embarked on the journey to have nuclear power plants since 1970s. We have the comprehensive education framework to develop nuclear talents. We also have a nuclear reactor in Bangi that is managed by Malaysians with excellent HSE records. We also used to have an organizations who are responsible to make sure that we have the right framework and direction to have the first nuclear power plant in Malaysia. So it seems like we have the right ingredients to have a nuclear power plant in Malaysia, but something is holding us back. And also, I believe that the major concern from the public on nuclear is nuclear plants expensive. So if we implement nuclear power in Malaysia, do we need to pay more in our TNB or in our electricity bill every month? And how about the constructions of nuclear projects? Will nuclear project be an over budget project, and we taxpayers have to pay for it? So all these are very interesting questions, and fret not, today we are going to answer these questions. Okay, so before I hand over the session to our moderator, Dr. Asrudi, I would like to encourage each of you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and also on YouTube. Just type Achieving Critical Mass and you can find us there. All right. So are you as excited as I am? All right. So without further ado, I will hand over the session to our moderator, Dr. Asrudi. The stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Azrudi. I'm with Critical Mass. I'll be moderating the session today. So, with me is a representative from Party Science, Bong, and also a representative from Party Socialist Malaysia, Arveent. Both of them are, they seem to be aware of the complications around the nuclear sector in Malaysia, and they are trying, in their personal capacity and in their capacity as party members, to introduce the public and the party members to nuclear energy. And I'm going to be interviewing them both. So also with us, supposed to be with us, is actually Mark. But Mark, unfortunately, Mark Nelson, he couldn't be with us. But we have pre-recorded an interview session with him, and we are going to play excerpts of our interview session during our live session today, and we'll get comments from our local politicians also on his answers, whether it applies locally or whether it doesn't. So, as many of you know, as we've learned in the past sessions, nuclear power is not a new activity in Malaysia. We've actually started to explore nuclear power since the 1980s. We already have a nuclear reactor in Malaysia operated by our own people. It's been refueled in 1980s. It hasn't been refueled since because the fuel lasts that long. We've been managing with radioactive waste. It's not the proper fission waste, but it's still radioactive waste. Still could be dangerous if mismanaged. But after 40 years, we've had no incidents, no warnings whatsoever from outside inspectors about our handling of radioactive materials. So I would like to talk to a representative from Party Science, Bong. So Bong, welcome to the session. Welcome to the as welcome to the session. I want to ask you, because you are a representative of Party Science, and I noticed that one of the policies of Party Science is your party has decided to include the research into alternative energy as part of your energy policy that you want to propose for Malaysia, and one of them is nuclear energy. How did your party arrive to that? Why did you include nuclear as one of your proposals for Malaysia?
Uh, okay, hello. Thank you, Dr. Azrudi. Thanks for having me. My name is Bong. I'm from Party Science Malaysia, Party Aspirasi Science Malaysia. So, Azrudi, to answer your question just now, why we include nuclear energy in our policy is because we have few main pillars of policies. One of it is energy security. The second, the another one of it is climate change. So for us to address these two policy, especially the energy security and the climate change, we should consider nuclear energy for the advantages that probably I will explain, or probably another panel, or probably even Dr. Azuli himself will elaborate later. I mean, for us uh, to really look into the energy security for Malaysia, to tackle climate change, our worry about the greenhouse gas emissions, we have to put nuclear energy into the energy mix to be considered. That's the main reason that we want. I mean, we are considering nuclear energy in our policy. We are open for discussion. We want all options to be put on the table. Then we evaluate it based on the facts, based on the data that we have, based on the evidence. Then only we make an informed decision without rejecting it outright. That's it.
So it looks like your party is trying to put data and science before emotion. Do you think that's a right move for a political party?
Um, yes, I think that is what separates us from the other parties. I mean, we have pledged ourselves to put everything. I mean, we do not give straight answers to all the question asked. We always say that there's no answers for everything. I mean, there's no right answer for everything at a particular time. It is always depends on the situation. We have to evaluate it based on the data on hand that we have. We have to look at the public opinion. Then we have to look at the facts and figures, the economics, everything. Then only we can inform the public so that they can judge for themselves. They can educate themselves, and then only they can make an educated and informed decision. I think that is the best thing to do instead of we rely on our emotion to make any decisions.
All right, thank you. And just to for the audience to know, we just caught Bong because the timing is quite packed. He just arrived in Sarike to join us just a few minutes ago before the session. So thank you for joining, Bong. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
So next is Arveent. I would like to ask you, as far as I understand, Parti Sosialis Malaysia, they are not pro-nuclear. They have not mentioned nuclear in a positive light. But you are a member of that party, and you seem to be convinced that nuclear is the right path forward. And you are struggling within your own party to convince them of nuclear as an option, a good option for the future of Malaysia. How can you tell me more about that? Like, what is your struggle? Is it difficult?
I
Why did you decide to do this?
I think it's. I wouldn't say okay. So let's start with the obvious. The Socialist Party is not pro-nuclear. It's actually been pretty anti-nuclear historically. But what we are concerned with is climate change. So we're all concerned with essentially climate change, carbon emissions, and how to curtail them. The Socialist Party is extremely invested in this. We are one of the first parties to actually make it our manifesto pledge to tackle climate change, and we see it as an existential threat. Basically, it has always been part of our initiative to do so. Recently, we are working together with. Actually, we are founding member of this organization called Gabungan Darurat Iklim, where we are directly tackling things that have to do with the climate emergency. So we're taking things very seriously. And for us, although we are in opposition to nuclear power, it is not a closed issue. Essentially, we have had a lot of conversations and backs and forth with our comrades, and both within the party and outside the party. As of right now, our members are not convinced yet, but the progress is there essentially when we try to unravel these very difficult misinformation that has gone on with nuclear energy. Um, so I would say that yes, we are not for nuclear at the moment. It's not a closed issue. I, for one, when I joined the party up until now, have been quite active in my promotion of nuclear power. There are other people in the party that are promoting nuclear power as well. But I think we need to understand that what we are actually promoting is not nuclear for nuclear's sake. It is a mixture. It's always an energy mix that is good for Malaysia. We cannot outrightly reject anything. We can only make judgment calls with the information that is being, what do you call that, in front of us. And essentially, my responsibility right now is if I do believe that nuclear power is the way to go as part of an energy mix for Malaysia, me and my comrades who do believe the same need to get together and make a convincing enough argument for our members. And that's where we are at the moment.
Have you ever worried about being so supportive of nuclear power and database solutions that it could compromise your political ambitions in the party?
I well, I am a committee member of the youth wing already. It's my second year, it's the third year in the party. My the party is not something that is so driven by, as Bong said, emotions. We are not an emotional party. Socialism is about the scientific method. It is about looking at what has gone wrong in the past, gone right in the past, making a dialectics of both, and making a judgment call to move forward in the future. Although we say that socialism is an ideology, it is an ideology that is built up from the scientific principles, as Marx and Engels have done. So even though I am completely pro-nuclear, I have supported nuclear power. I've supported even Linus, where we are when we were against Linus um, on these issues. My party has not taken that what do you call taken any things away from me, because what I have said was very clearly based on facts, and these are the things that will build us in the future as well.
Well, thank you, and welcome to the panel as well, Arveent.
Thank you.
So a third member of our panel is Mark Nelson. He's a nuclear advocate. He's actually, if you know about Greenpeace, he's the opposite of that. He's the science Greenpeace. They go around the world. They get on boats. They protest uh, government decisions that are made by public pressure that has no basis in science. So he goes around the world, gets involved in all the controversies around the deployment of nuclear, for example, and he's gotten himself involved in that. So I'll let him introduce himself through a video that we've pre-recorded during my one-to-one interview session with him. So I asked him what introduced Mark. I asked Mark what introduced him to nuclear power. So let's play that video. So you're pro-nuclear. How did you come to be pro-nuclear? Were you born like this, or?
No, I come from oil and gas country. I'm from Oklahoma in the United States. My family for 2 generations has been part of oil and gas business. When I was young, I saw a flyer in the mail that said pay extra to get 100% wind turbine electricity. And I went to my parents. I said, you have to do this. And there's that, are you paying for it? And I said, well, maybe. How much is it? And then, I'm trying to figure out how much it costs to see whether it's worth forcing my family to get wind electricity. I went to a university without any nuclear engineering. In fact, the first time I thought seriously about nuclear power is because I went to a boarding school for 1 year, just 1 year. And at that boarding school, there's a nearby nuclear plant providing most of the electricity. And all the parents have to sign a special safety release authorizing the boarding school to administer emergency iodine pills if the nuclear plant has a meltdown.
Wow, that's scary.
That's it.
Must be scary for the parents.
Else. What?
Must be scary for the parents. It must
yeah,
have been...
I mean, what you're learning is that nuclear is evil. You've got to have emergency medicine for it. And if it melts down, they'll try to take care of your kids so they don't get cancer and die.
So that's Mark. He was supposed to be with us today, but he had to go to Diablo Canyon. They had organized an activity to protest the government decision to close down the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant in California. The current governor, the newly elected governor, has pledged to shut it down by 2025, while it is the single best, cleanest, and largest generation capacity in California. And as you know, they've had problems. They've had energy problems where they had to suffer blackouts and they had to suffer imports from their neighbors. But they also committed to shut down this nuclear power plant. So Mark is joining a few other organizations to protest this activist, and it had to be done today. Today is a Friday night in the United States, so that's the best time for this. So what we had to do, we had to arrange for his session with my one-to-one session with him. A couple of days ago, while he just arrived from Belgium and he was on his way to California. So that's when we arranged for this interview with him. We just caught him. We're lucky to have him with us. So the first question that people really want to ask and Malaysians want to know is, can we, Malaysia as a country, can we afford a nuclear power plant? What do you think, guys? Should I ask you, Arveent? Arveent, what do you think? Can Malaysia afford a nuclear? It's an expensive plant, and it requires a lot of investment.
It's an expensive plant, yeah. I think we have to. Well, a bit of a background on this is I've been working on nuclear power. Well, I've been working on the literature research of nuclear power in the past 3 years or so, and what I can say is nuclear power plants are expensive. They are expensive in the way that you pay upfront a lot of money, but what you don't see is that they can stay on for decades, and I'm talking 60 years at a minimum. 80 years. A lot of plants are actually going up to 80, especially new plants are designed to for production of energy up until 80 years. Some even are saying that it may go up to 100. We will see if a century plant does exist at the moment in the next few decades. But when you take the really long time frame into consideration and the amount of energy that you can produce from a relatively small amount of fuel, that cost actually comes way down. So if we take billions and billions of USD plant that is being built, let's say if it's a 10 billion USD plant, if it runs for 80 years, the amount of electricity that it produces, if we divide it by the cost, is a very low cost essentially. So when we talk about is nuclear plant expensive, we have to think about, okay, it's expensive in the upfront, but how long of electricity is it going to generate? How stable is the electricity? How efficient is it? And what it can really bring basically. So you're paying, you are paying a lot upfront, but you're getting a lot of value in the back end. What we can compare this with is renewable energy. So renewable energy comparatively is much cheaper, and it is also quote unquote faster to build. But in that, you are actually introducing something that does not provide you electricity 24/7. It depends on weather, it depends on storage, it depends on the availability of land. So all of those factors go in, and when you really are honest about it, when you take all of the storage consideration into plan, you can see that renewable energy, especially for a country like Malaysia that does not have wind, that does not have geothermal vents, we are completely reliant on solar power, for example. It is astronomically high as well, comparable or even sometimes higher than nuclear power plants, especially if you compare it to Asian power plants like China and Korea that have building very cheap nuclear power because of the length of time they have to build it historically. So is nuclear expensive? Yes, in the short run, but quite cheap in the long run. It is viable and it is comparable to renewable energy, I would say.
So what you're saying is basically it's costly upfront, but the future generations, your children, your children's children are going to benefit from cheaper electricity if you take that sacrifice now. It's kind of
Yeah.
making a large investment for a very high quality product.
It's like buying
Um,
costly shoes basically compared to cheap shoes. Don't have to replace the cheap the shoes so much. It lasts you forever basically.
I appreciate that analogy. So, Bong, from what I understand, you're from Sarawak. Your party originated
Yes.
has its roots from Sarawak as well, and
Mhm.
you have this large hydro dam there. And would you be able to? Do you draw an analogy between nuclear power investment and hydro dam investment? What's the problem with hydro? Why can't you discontinue hydro? Why do you need nuclear at all?
Okay, just I want to just support what Arvin said just now.
Mm,
Nuclear power is expensive. 60% of the total cost come from the upfront cost, which is the capital cost. But when we look at the long term and the efficiency of the nuclear power plant itself, then it is a viable alternative to other energy sources. And you just mentioned about hydro dam. I mean, I just quoted the most famous hydro dam in Sarawak, which is Bakun. Bakun is the size of Singapore. I think it's around 700 square kilometers, around 700 square kilometer. So, I mean, comparing that hydro, this power plant to a nuclear power plant, the nuclear power plant, I think the average size of it is only 1 square mile or 3 square kilometer, which is
yeah.
very much less compared to the hydro land use. I mean, the footprint for hydro plant is very big, very huge, and the power that provided by hydro plant, I mean, for Bakun is only 2,400 megawatts. I mean, for a standard this nuclear plant, you probably can build up to 500 or even 1,000 megawatt of nuclear plant. Then people always forget about the capacity or the capacity factor or the efficiency of the
Mm,
power plant itself. I mean, why we want to why we should bring up the efficiency point, because if we compare all the energy sources, nuclear, coal, natural gas, wind, solar, I mean, Arvind has mentioned wind and solar just now also. I think nuclear has proven itself to be able to operate at 90% of the time at 100% capacity. So it means that when you run the plant, you want it to be at 100% capacity most of the time, so that you don't waste the fuel and you get the most out of it. You get the most capacity out of it. So comparing nuclear with hydro is only around 45%, below 50%. So in order for you to have the similar electricity generation for, let's say, if we build a nuclear plant in Sarawak, which is 1,000 gigawatts power plant, nuclear power plant, we have to build 2 or 3 hydro plants, and we have to sacrifice a much bigger area compared to if we build something like a nuclear plant. So the problem with hydro, specifically to answer your question, is the area that we have to sacrifice. Then the cost that we do not see is the cost of relocating people. The cost to the flora and faunas there. The life of the people that change, and future problems that we face because we clear up such a big catchment of area for the hydro power plant.
Yeah, that's a good point actually, because most people overlook that the size of the hydro plant is actually quite small, but the size of the lake that powers the hydro dam, people often overlook that. Yes, you're right. There are a lot of controversies, a lot of protests against Bakun in the past because of this, because they had to flood a lot of towns for it. And of course, like you said, the capacity factor is 50%. That's because hydro cannot run indefinitely. You need a certain amount of water level on it as well. Thanks.
Yes.
That's a good point, actually. So I also asked Mark Nelson about this question: can developing countries like Malaysia, can we afford nuclear energy? So let's see what Mark has to say. Well, Malaysians are concerned whether we can afford a nuclear power plant because nuclear power plants, they are expensive.
Yes, but they make cheap electricity. Think about this. They're expensive but make cheap electricity. It's the opposite of renewables nowadays. A lot of renewables are cheap but make expensive electricity.
You mean at your meter? The price of the electricity at the meter.
At the meter. And there's another thing. Renewables have so many hidden costs that don't show up until a disaster. In Texas, renewables were very cheap until they weren't there when power was expensive. Oops. And then people are saying, no, the renewables are still cheap. They just didn't make any power when, 3 years worth of electricity value was transacted in 4 days. Nearly $50 billion of electricity was transacted, buyers and sellers in Texas, people going bankrupt, consumer debt piling up in 4 days, during which the $70 billion of renewables installed in Texas produced almost no output. So people said, no, but the renewables are still cheap. They were, but renewables aren't electricity, are they? The electricity grid is electricity. So you can say renewables are cheap. Hell, you can have free solar and you're going to have incredibly expensive electricity at night.
Right. Yeah, it's all the supply and demand question again. It's just that.
Which is why people are saying solar and wind aren't expensive. Humans just need to stop using power when the weather doesn't cooperate. In which case, you're back to not being a developed country.
So Mark also said that, I asked Mark another question that you both have answered already. So I asked him another question. He noted that renewables are cheap when they generate electricity. That's why their LCOE price looks cheaper than baseload plants. But they become very expensive when they don't generate electricity, because now the demand is there, but the supply is not there. So the function of supply and demand becomes haywire, and you have to call up your supply is now scarce. So yeah, we understand that. But I asked him again, what about the high capital cost of nuclear power, the money that you have to spend now? So let's see what Mark has to say about this. Right. So going back to the high cost of nuclear power plant situation, how, investors, they want their money, they want their return really, really quickly. And nuclear power plants, it'll take decades for you to get your returns. And
it depends. Azrudi, is the alternative power expensive or cheap? Nuclear plants across Europe are making a year of revenue in a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that was a statement that may have been true before this energy crisis. And this is an energy crisis caused by insufficient amounts of the alternatives, gas and wind. There is enough wind. And people say, oh, well, this proves we need more wind turbines, not expensive nuclear. But think about this. If there was more wind turbines, the expectation to natural gas suppliers and their revenues the past few years would have cratered even worse. We would have had a bigger supply crunch this year when the wind went down. You wouldn't have avoided it. You would have made it worse. If Texas had had double, triple, 10 times as much wind, half the power plants that kept Texas alive in the freeze, barely alive, would have been gone already. And they would have definitely had blackouts. I mean, not just the blackouts they had, they would have potentially lost their whole grid.
Yeah, so Mark made a notable comment that Texas, the blackouts in Texas, you're both aware of that, they would have suffered worse if they had more wind when wind wasn't available. You can install 1,000 times more wind, but if the wind is not available, you still have blackouts, right? So, but Malaysia, we're also investing in a similar technology where we don't have wind because we're in the equator, but we have solar. So the problem with solar is when they go down, they all go down together. However many you install, they all go down together. So because you both are also supporters of renewable energy, how would you attempt to solve this issue, this intermittency issue? I'll ask Bong.
I think it's back to the efficiency problem again. I mean, solar itself, solar PV is only comparing the capacity factor is only 25% compared to nuclear energy, which is 90%. So it is totally not efficient. I mean, if you want to get the same amount of electricity from solar, you have to put up a very big solar farm. You have to sacrifice a very big, not to talk about the intermittent issues, but then you need a very big area to put up all this solar farm. I mean, to do that, you have to clear something. Or I think, I mean, some of the people, they said that they will put it on the legs, everything. Then you will come up with a different problem, a different set of problem to solve. So we are not really solving the problem there. So for renewables, I mean, in Malaysia, I think we cannot rely on wind. We probably looking into solar now, and I mean, Sarawak is looking into hydrogen. I mean, all these are the alternative energy sources that we can consider. But in the overall energy mix, we should really consider nuclear because it is just more efficient. It is very reliable. It is up most of the time. It has a very high degree of predictability. Yes, the cost can be huge upfront, but it is over. We have to look at it like what Arveent just said. We have to look at it 60 years, 80 years, divided that and comparing the same amount of time you put up the solar plant for 60 years, 80 years. I think the cost, I mean, the data, the figures will definitely show you that nuclear is cheaper in the long run. Yeah. I do support alternative, renewable energy, but then not in the scale that we should consider nuclear as the part of the energy mix. We probably should have some solar farm wherever we can do it. Then we probably should consider biogas or biomass, where we, as a Malaysia, I mean, we have so many these palm oil mills where we can tap into all the biogas generated by their waste. Yes, we can utilize all that, but it is still not enough. I mean, Malaysia, I think one of the panelists by Critical Mass mentioned this before. Our electricity, I mean, our power generation in Malaysia are mostly contributed by coal and gas, up to 90%, hydro 10% probably. So the rest is less than 5%. How are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to address climate change? We cannot have energy, and because of the intermittent issues, we do not have high reliability. we do not have energy security if we put all our eggs in this renewable energy basket. That's for me.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it surprised me to hear you from Party Science. Well, it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it's I like it that you said that you care about the land, so that you care about the land use as well. Because I was expecting that from Party Socialist Malaysia to make that strong stand, but I'm glad that Party Science also agree with that, because so you're both in agreement that land is very important for us, especially in a tropical country like Malaysia, where we have agriculture, not like other countries. I want to ask Arveent the same question, but I want to save you. I want to save you for our economics
Save
topic.
me.
So yeah,
Sure.
I'll save you for a bit, because I asked
Sure.
Mark, because the UK is they are facing energy crisis as a result of these risky investments into renewable energy that, like Bong mentioned earlier, the intermittency has caused the grid to become unreliable. Therefore, they have to start up their coal plants. They have to pay higher gas prices because the demand for gas is suddenly very, very high. So I asked Mark about the UK energy crisis. Um, because investment consultants, they report they predicted that everything will be fine if you go for 100% in unreliable supplies. So what does Mark have to say about that? So what can you tell us about why the United Kingdom, you're aware of this, why United Kingdom has decided to restart their coal plant? Has that got anything to do with their policy of not building nuclear after Chernobyl, and well, the result of all this perfect storm that's happening right now?
Yes. So this is the difference between academic thinking and the real world. In academic thinking, an average value is the same thing as a momentary value. Let me explain what I mean by that. There's a phrase that says, if you can't swim and somebody pays you $100 to cross a 1 kilometer river with a average depth of 1 meter, do you do it? Average depth 1 meter. You're taller than a meter, aren't you, Azruti?
But it's average, so it could be
average. The electricity grid must work every single second, or your nation falls apart. Every second.
Right.
The claim about wind in the UK is that on average, wind easily replaces coal.
All right.
And as long as it keeps doing that on average, it's cheaper than coal.
Right.
Now we're running into the deep part of the river where the wind is barely moving. I mean, there's a bit of wind the last few days, but there were weeks with almost no wind. And the coal had to come back because it didn't really matter what the average was. It mattered what the deepest part of the stream was. If you don't survive the deepest part of the stream, it doesn't matter that it's shallow on the other end. You won't get there. That's the problem.
Yeah, so Mark pointed at that the reason why governments believe that electricity becomes more expensive, cheaper with lots of renewable penetration, is because in their reports, they just report simple values. They report average values rather than truly analyzing the supply demand, because the grid has to be available every second. It cannot just be available on an average value. So that's... So I want to show this slide. Can we put my chart up? And these are the European retail electricity price. This is the price that people pay. This is the price that is charged by the meter. So whatever. So what we want to show you is that with increased wind and solar capacity, the tendency for electricity prices becomes more expensive. That is despite wind and solar becoming cheaper and cheaper every year. And we can see countries that have deployed unreliable renewables, they have traditionally resulted in higher electricity prices, where countries that depend on a lot of hydro and nuclear, like France, like Belgium, like Sweden, like Norway, they tend to have cheaper electricity price. But this is not exactly conclusive, because it's a function of many things. It's a function of what the populace can afford, This is priced in European cents per unit of electricity. It depends on how well the economy is doing as well. So it's not truly conclusive, but it's possible to draw a linear chart for this. So Arveent, as someone from Party Socialist, what would you like to see in Malaysia? Do you think making electricity scarce, making people pay more for electricity, will result in better life because people are now going to start saving they use electricity? They're going to start unplugging everything all the time. And is that the lifestyle that Malaysia should pursue because the electricity has become more expensive?
It's a very loaded question. So let's talk about it, right? So when we talk about costs, we have to differentiate between what we have to like really understand what those costs entail. So when you talk about intermittent energy sources, you can think about things like how much materials they're going to go through, what is the amount of land that they're going to take, how much water did they take to what do you call that, utilize to generate electricity. So those are material costs, as in the costs are tied to mining, the costs are tied to land use. For nuclear power, the cost is tied to insurance, so it's kind of not that material basically. So your mining, your land use, all of those are actually minimized when it comes to nuclear power. So that's the thing. You see, when I looked at the price of electricity in all of these countries, the cheapest prices came out in places like Ukraine, Slovakia, Finland, France. High penetration of nuclear power. So personally, I think it's a good justification to say that actually, as you can see here, we will have cheaper we have cheaper electricity when we go with nuclear energy. But for my party and myself included, I think it's good that we look at a mixed grid with both nuclear power and renewables. When I was with Liberasi, we came up with a grid that can work for Malaysia, that only had 40% nuclear energy actually. The other 25% of the rest was biomass, palm oil. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, it's a bit.
Yes.
We can hear you, but the line has been weak. But we
Oh,
can hear you.
uh, my apologies for my line. Let me try to okay, do something. Okay, and start back. Cool. Right. So where was I? Liberasi. When I was in Liberasi, our grid that we wanted to come up with was only 40% nuclear, with 25% of the rest being biomass. As Bong pointed out, we have a lot of palm oil mills, and even the Socialist Party is looking at generating biogas from palm oil. But one thing that we can do is generate electricity from boilers using the solid waste of palm oil. And we did have some solar and we did have some waste energy and stuff like that. And that's because we really wanted to maximize the amount of electricity that is produced from a mixed grid essentially, so that one, we can utilize things like solar for cutting down the peak demand, which it is good for. But another is also where it is cheaper, we can actually utilize it as well. I think another thing that I want to quickly point out is the fact that we as environmental activists sometimes get into the weeds of thinking like we need to have renewable energy, we need to have decentralized energy because we need to have our communities controlling that energy. That doesn't make sense to me, because let's say you have a solar farm or a run of river nuclear run of river hydro plant that is managed by the local community. Yes, it is managed by the local community, but they do not own the technology. You still need people to produce the panels, you still need people to produce the machinery. So in that sense, who really owns the power? So where is the political power? I mean, where is the power really situated with? Is it with private capitalists that produce this machinery, or is it really with the local community that is only managing it? They're still reliant on um, this kind of relationship. So when I think about things like this, I really don't want penetration of energy, which is a basic right, to be controlled by private hands. And when you look at historically nuclear energy, the only way that it has worked is from state ownership, is from collective ownership of the people. So in my head, it makes sense for what do you call this energy source makes sense for the state to be involved in, as it becomes now what do you call that a kind of like a surety for the people that they will get energy when they want it, and they're not going to be controlled by private hands.
That's an interesting point. So you're arguing against the participation of the people, but you brought up a good point, because their participation is in operations. They're being just kaki tangan of someone else who's making money, which is the manufacturers, who are generally not them, not the people in the villages. Yeah, that's actually a good point. And nuclear power plant, although they have been they operate in some nuclear power operations are in private hands now, but historically they were tied to the state, and there could be a middle model where it could be controlled by a co-op, like people themselves own the nuclear power plant, rather than just certain private companies with profit-oriented CEOs. That's a good point, actually. And so going from that, because Malaysia, we are going to have higher renewable penetration, because that's been decided by the government. And that is the popular recommendation. You hear it from corporates, you hear it from people, I'm sure you hear it from your party members as well. So I asked Mark that what we see in Western countries is that their electricity costs are becoming higher. So why? So let's hear it from Mark. So as Malaysia is moving towards more renewable penetration, intermittent renewable penetration, it seems that the LCOE for baseload plants like coal and gas, they're going to be higher because they don't run that often. So, but you still need them to power up when renewables are down.
Right. I would put it this way. If you're comparing the transportation costs of different methods of transportation for a city, rickshaws are so much cheaper than subways. And subways are even cheaper than regional trains that cross through the city underground. But they don't do the same things as Rudy. Hell, you can get an army of rickshaws in minutes, but that's not transportation the same way a subway is. If you were comparing the cost of going across the Atlantic Ocean, swimming, kayaking, steamship, and airplane, you'd see that no one could ever afford an airplane, because it's so cheap just to swim. Now, swimming doesn't do the same thing. So so people saying, oh, the levelized cost of electricity of wind. No, that's levelized cost of energy. You don't get electricity just because you build a wind turbine. You get electricity because you have a grid for a wind turbine to penetrate into.
Right.
That's
so
the truth that's being revealed in UK. Wind is still cheap, levelized cost of electricity, as power is so expensive that people are plunging into energy poverty and their electricity companies are blowing up. It doesn't matter how cheap wind is. It matters how cheap electricity is. And electricity with wind is really expensive.
Yeah, so it seems Mark agree with you both, and it's normally difficult to get agreement with all the panels, especially from different parties. I was expecting you guys to fight each other, but I'm glad you're all on the same page. So, but here's another question.
We never rehearse this thing.
Yeah, we never rehearse this thing. So I'm happy for that. So, but here is where it might be, I'm sure your party members also think the same, because I've also been involved. Well, I've also read the conversations among your party members. So one popular question among Malaysians is whether Malaysians, just these people from Semenanjung and Sabah Sarawak, from this developing country, whether we can run nuclear power plants. So I asked Mark this first, and I want to hear from you after. So let's hear it from Mark.
Do Malaysians think that they have better health and safety standards than India?
I believe most Malaysians think so, yes.
All right. And India has not had any
Has.
major nuclear accidents.
Yep. Mm.
Okay. So what you're saying is Malaysian health and safety is not up to snuff, even compared to India. What you're saying is India can, but Malaysia can't. I've got a question. Bangladesh is going to build reactors and they're going to run them. They'll probably run them really well. Are you saying that Malaysia can't handle what Bangladesh is going to handle? Is that what Malaysians think?
That's what Malaysians think.
Okay, so Bangladesh can do it, Malaysia can't. Philippines is going to get nuclear, okay? And Malaysia can't handle it. Okay.
Malaysians seem to think that because we've constructed bridges that collapse, we've constructed stadiums that collapse, so therefore our health and safety culture, it's just not good enough to build nuclear plants.
Let me turn that around then. Rudy, let me turn that around. It sounds like what Malaysia needs is a nuclear program, because nuclear is the only thing in the world, and maybe aviation is another. Nuclear and aviation are two industries where the entire world will come to your doorstep offering help, free help, to make sure you do it well and that you're meeting all the international standards. And nuclear is, if anything, much more intense with much less, a lot fewer ways to get it wrong than aviation. In aviation, when the equivalent of a meltdown happens, everyone dies. And that's not true in nuclear.
Yeah, as we addressed in week one, nuclear power so far has only really, it's not truly to be proud of, but it is the best generation technology that we have. It's only really killed 90 people in 35 years of operation, but it's often viewed as the most dangerous source of technology. So what about you guys? Are you afraid? Are you proud of our aviation sector? Are you afraid to go on airplanes? So both of you, anyone, like, you're confident.
Let me
Let
take that.
Arveent
Because,
answer.
yeah, I mean, that's a good comparison, I would say, because it's a good comparison because it's a good analogy. But let me just add on to this. Basically, nuclear power is not an industry that you can just get into if you want it. Basically, that's not how it works. How it works is you need to source for fuel, you need to make sure that your siting is in order, you need so many things to go right, and you need all of this documented and vetted internationally before you can even get the permission to get to get a nuclear power plant. So it's not like setting up shop in front of your house. It's not that at all. It's very, very difficult to get access to do this nuclear energy. So whether we can or we cannot, if we get permission to do a nuclear power plant from the international community, then we would already have then it would have already been deemed that we have the capacity to handle it, basically. So just getting in is hard enough. It's like getting into like university in China, basically. Like if you get in, you're smart already, because that's the level that you need to prove to get in the first place. And I think for Malaysia, right, when it comes to energy, I have to commend, although I have my reservations against TNB, I have to commend them for doing excellent work with the energy producing technologies that they have right now. We have one of the best coal power plants in the world. I hate it. I want it to close, but we have one of the best coal power plants in the world, and it is managed very well. It should be shut down, but it shows that with really high cutting edge technology, we do have the capacity to do so. And it doesn't really matter when it comes to nuclear power, because we'll be forced to do so by everyone around us in the first place.
So what you want is you want to move the people who operate coal power plants into, for example, a nuclear power plant where they can produce clean electricity at the high safety standards that they've all been operating there.
That or the biomass energy that I was talking about,
Sure.
basically. So let's just take out coal. I mean, I hate coal. We don't even produce coal in Malaysia. We are imperializing other countries by putting mines there, and then we are killing people there with black lung. Let's just take coal out of the equation, basically.
Sure. Bong, I want to ask you a question, but after this one, because I want to save you for the next one. So I asked Mark whether Malaysia, a developing country, can we have a power plant, nuclear power plant, if we don't have any talents or expertise in nuclear? So let's hear it from Mark. Do you think Malaysia could have a nuclear power plant when Malaysia has no technical expertise to build a nuclear power plant?
Chicken and egg, as Rudy.
Mm.
Can Malaysia have tall skyscrapers if you didn't invent skyscrapers? Yep. Can Malaysia have internet if the internet was invented in America? Yep. I think you should look at it the other way around. If Malaysia doesn't get internet, you're not going to get expertise at building and constructing your own internet. If you don't get a space program, you're going to be an observer to other people's space program. If you don't get nuclear, you're going to watch all your neighbors get nuclear, and maybe you can stick out a little power line and get their power. If you don't try to get nuclear, you're not going to learn to get nuclear. Is it a possibility that Malaysia moves towards nuclear and all the international observers say, you know, we really worked hard with you guys, but you're just so dumb and you're not good at math, and you're just not honest, and you're just not conscientious, and you aren't operating in good faith, and nobody wants to take the nuclear engineering courses, and you can't seem to make your way to observe other reactors, and so we just give up on you. I guess such a thing has not really happened as far as I know. I think that if Malaysians wanted nuclear, you could get it, and not only that, you do a damn fine job. Why? Because the most serious and talented people in Malaysia would show up for this burden, this honor, and they would do honor to your country.
I guess that's the thing. Like when people say that Malaysians construct stadiums that crash or bridges that collapse, don't put those guys to work in the nuclear power plants. Find the best people to work in the nuclear power plants, not those guys.
Yeah, and it's not like there's an international stadium operators union that has recommendation reports with nearly the force of law, like culturally. If WANO, like World Association of Nuclear Operators, comes and visits your plant and they say, we have these problems here, it is a crisis. It's a crisis. People change out top management. They sack board members. They get rid of lower level managers. I've heard about this before, even in first world countries where WANO or INPO comes and visits, and they give you a report that says, we just don't think that these are best practices internationally. Heads roll, as Rudy. Heads roll.
I've heard about
and
that
they
too.
get the right people in. They get the place up to snuff. Changes happen. And this is sometimes developing countries with nuclear programs sends investigators to first world countries, and they find problems. It's everybody working together to keep these things good. There's no equivalent of that for stadiums. I don't think there's an equivalent of that for bridges. And there's one more thing. This is a voluntary thing. If your country doesn't want to, you can turn away the voluntary international inspectors and this is not the atomic materials. This isn't like anti-proliferation. I mean the quality of operations. But think about what it looks like to turn away a voluntary, helpful inspection from your peers who just want to see you succeed. Terrible look. No one turns them away. Everybody participates.
It looks terrible to the investors too. Like, why are you turning away?
Exactly. Investors in the nuclear plant want that free help. Because do you know what that free help does? It's not just safety. They make your performance boosted. They get you operating like America if you want to, 90% capacity factor or better. So in all these ways, I'm not trying to make light of the people who have added questions that say, I'm a Malaysian and I just don't think we're good enough. No, it's the other way around. Malaysia becomes good enough through nuclear. And then the head of your nuclear companies, the vice presidents, they go and they start building bridges, and those bridges will stand up.
Great. So joining the building a nuclear power plant actually puts you in a family, and I've not heard of that in any other industry. That if you build a stadium, you have a family of stadium operators around the world where they come to inspect your stadium whether you're doing it right. It only happens in nuclear, and many people are not aware of that. So I want to ask you, Bong, do you think that building a nuclear power plant might be the catalyst that we need to improve our safety culture? Are you convinced by Mark's argument of that?
Yes, I'm convinced. I'm totally agree with what Mark has said. I think the problem with Malaysia quoting all those accidents. Probably we just have that do not have that level of trust for the projects or whatever things that we have done under the previous government or probably current government. So I don't know. It is just that we do not have that level of trust for the current leaders or previous leaders. Managing all these projects, but not to say that we do have so many other complicated projects, big projects we have done, like what Mark have said. If we never built these high skyscrapers, then would we know how to do it and we do know how to build it? So I don't think it's a question of we do not have a good H&E, but then we have a fantastic oil and gas industry. I think we can turn that to our advantage if we consider nuclear as well. I mean, like you said, then it is under so much scrutiny, nuclear industry. Then you have a family, volunteers, a group of volunteers coming to inspect every quarterly. Then it is very, very hard for us to make mistakes. I mean, if you want to look at the previous accidents or unfortunate accidents happen with nuclear or any other incidents, you always find that it is human error. People do not follow the H&E practices, good practices, everything. So if we try our best to follow the recommended H&E practices, I think we will do just fine. We will do just fine.
Thank you, Bong. So I want to show the next popular question that people always ask about nuclear is about what are we going to do with the waste. So I want to show this slide about the world's mankind's management of waste. So nuclear waste is currently the only waste that's actually managed. We've not really spoken. We've not actually criticized all the other industries that produce waste. For example, coal, we think they have no waste because their waste goes to the atmosphere, and that's what's causing one of the things that are causing the climate emergency now. So Arveent, as a person from PSM, I understand that you have to leave now because we've only booked you for 1 hour.
My apologies.
No, our apologies for for having such an interesting thought. We want to keep going on, but unfortunately we can't have you. But before you go, I want to ask your opinion about aren't you concerned about nuclear waste at all?
Yeah, we are very concerned about nuclear waste. In fact, it's nuclear waste is a big stumbling block to a lot of people within our party when they look at all of the information. There's an information overload of like, oh, nuclear waste is going to be here for millions of years. We cannot really handle it, stuff like that. But when you really go down to look at it, nuclear waste is is contained, it is dry, it is not released to the environment. There is a specific protocol to store it, specific protocol to reprocess it that is being used in many different countries as well, including the UK and France. So the waste problem was a problem in the 90s. Right now, or in the 80s, right now, I think it is a solved issue. When it comes to actually, in fact, the waste problem really lies with renewable energy sources. When we talk about solar panels, how are you going to reprocess all of the special materials that go into solar panels? Is there a plan to that? And so far, I have seen none, essentially. So when we this is the things that we need to take into consideration. Environment is not just about generating electricity. It's about how you manage the waste and where they go, in essence. Of course, fossil fuels, we know they go into the environment, and we need to take cognizance into how we manage the waste products, especially with the huge amount of materials that go into generating electricity, essentially.
All right. Thank you for that. And I appreciate you for being here for as part of a panelist. We tried to extract as many of your party stand and your personal stand as well to share with everyone about your sacrifice, personal sacrifice really to your political ambitions, whether it will make a great dent for your future, for our future, and for our children's future. So
Of
thank you,
course.
Arveen, for
Thanks so
joining
much for
us.
having me. Thank you,
Thank you.
Bong, for being here as
Thanks,
well.
Arvin.
All
Good to
right.
see
Have a
you.
great forum. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
So, Bong, it'll be you and me, and we'll continue talking with Mark, basically. So, basically, I asked Mark whether nuclear waste is a huge problem, but Mark has some comments about how he thinks nuclear waste should be managed. It's currently being proposed to the public that you have to store it, you have to keep it away from people, you have to stay away from it. Mark has different ideas, so let's hear it from Mark.
Nuclear waste barely takes up any space. It means you have unlimited possibilities, good possibilities of what to do with it. My preference is that you decorate it with art. You make the facility such a good museum that school groups pay you to visit the nuclear waste. I mean, look, the facility I visited in Netherlands is so good. They're going to have wait times and they're going to have to ration tours somehow. And I think they're going to have to ration it by using admission tickets.
Oh.
Right? That's how to handle nuclear waste. And you might be saying, whoa. Why would anybody go visit nuclear waste? Because it's so fascinating. First, you power society. Then you have some material. What do you do with that material? You know that it changes over long periods of time. You know that you can handle it safely because no one's ever been hurt by a nuclear fuel rod handled properly. And nuclear fuel rods are handled properly pretty much everywhere. As far as I know, there's been 2 deaths due to improper handling of nuclear waste, both in Japan. So we're seeing a little pattern there, both in Japan, both from a reprocessing plant, which I don't think is probably in Malaysia's plans.
It's not. So, Bong, you know that nuclear waste is very, very dense. It's like, this is the waste, right? Or the waste is about the size of that. That's about the weight of it's about 10 grams, equivalent to about 150 barrels of oil. And the question about waste can be solved if we reprocess this fuel, but there's so little of this waste. There's so little. Well, this is not real waste. I wouldn't be holding it. It's just a model. But so there are countries that, because they want to appease public opinion so much, that they ask, that they propose that we should recycle all this waste. We should reprocess this waste. The difficulty, the controversy with recycling nuclear waste is that it creates a path to harvest plutonium, which is a path towards making nuclear weapons, which is it's become, you're creating opportunities to stray from the path of nuclear power. Do you think Malaysia, in the short term or long term, should explore reprocessing of nuclear waste?
Wow.
Or you can say the short term. In the short term, once we have our first nuclear power plant, should we be able to reprocess this, reprocess our waste? The volume is so little.
If the volume is so little, I think there's no economic sense for us to, reprocess it. Then again, technologies keep on evolving. We do not know, by the time we have a nuclear power plant, they probably have any other use for the waste. They probably, we probably will have a better nuclear plant which can make use of the nuclear waste, which is more efficient. And by then, yes, we probably should look into that. But then again, we have the problem, the dilemma that you mentioned just now. We open ourselves to this what is it, the weaponizing of
the nuclear
uranium
sector. Yes.
The nuclear sector, yes. But that would be a big political risk that we have to take. I think it is not a very simple question to answer. I think we have to look at what our neighbors are doing. Like you have mentioned, Mark has mentioned, Philippines has been looking into nuclear power plant seriously. Indonesia also has been looking into that, and I think you have mentioned to me they are going to build it in Kalimantan next to Sarawak even. So if they are looking into that, then I mean we can always learn and copy whatever that our neighbors are doing. I mean, yeah, why not? Why not? I mean, we are always open. Like I say, we cannot make any we cannot straight outright reject the premise of not exploring that option until we look at the situation at that time with the data and the the, the figures that we have. Probably we need it that time. Probably all the I mean by that time we say we want to have nuclear uh, weapons. I don't know. So yeah, if the needs arise, then probably then we should we should explore that option. Yeah.
Sure.
But for me,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry to put you in a difficult position, but it's my job as moderator to give a hard time to politicians. So, but if you eventually become part of the government, would you consider it to work with all these Asian countries that are exploring nuclear power plants, and they will have their own ways, they will have collected their own ways to construct one facility that is shared among all these countries, and you recycle the waste from this center? Therefore, there will be no risk of weapons proliferation because now the recycled fuel belongs to all these countries together. Would you be would you think that's
Yes.
something your party would explore?
Yes. I mean, the more people get involved with something so dangerous like a nuclear weapon, the harder it is for us to unilaterally do it. I mean, putting everyone in a very difficult position, right? So, yes, if that situation arises, yes, we should really explore and we should really put our heads together and work with our neighbors to do that. Yes, I would
Great.
agree to do that. Totally.
Great, thank you. So for the audience, we actually have a new panelist that I want to introduce. Her name is Marie. Let's put her on stream. Hi, Marie.
Hiya.
So Marie is from the UK. She's a member of Women in Nuclear. She has no affiliation to any nuclear industry. She decided to join this movement, Women in Nuclear, because well, I read it because I read your profile that you think nuclear will be the best option for the future generation, for your children, and that's why it's Mothers for Nuclear.
Mothers
Or
for
is it?
Nuclear, yeah. Mothers for Nuclear. There is a group called Women in Nuclear, but
right.
there might be more people employed by the industry. So, Mothers for Nuclear was started in the States by Heather and Christian in 2016. It's just like a worldwide collective of mums who are, like you say, want to do the best for our kids. We need to keep warming to a minimum, and that task can't be done without nuclear energy. So I think there's mums in the UK, Finland, Canada, Taiwan, Germany. So, I mean, personally, I'm just trying to put pressure on people in positions of influence just to discourage all the anti-nuclearism. So tabloids, the politicians, investors, academics and stuff. Yeah.
Sure. And weren't you concerned at all about nuclear before joining the movement? I mean, surely you joined because you studied all the alternative energies and you wanted to choose what was best for your kids and the future generations.
When I was a teenager, I was set a task of comparing different energy sources. So I was kind of interested in all the renewables and stuff, and wondering why they weren't used to scale. And 25 years later, we're still sort of, they contribute so little. And when the book came out by Professor David Mackay, talking, just writing, with the math, calculating the difference between different energy sources, and you can see the scale to which we could decarbonize using nuclear compared to anything else. It's just a no-brainer. And there's the sort of radiation issues which are presented by the media are so out of tune. Having read Radiation and Reason by Professor Allison, who I met about 5 years ago, sort of completely, that once those kind of fears are talked about and explained, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with nuclear energy.
So you started with a fear of nuclear energy, and then you thought, instead of fearing it, you became more curious and you started to read about it and you start to ask people who are involved. So that's amazing.
It's that thing. If you fear something, you want to try and understand it, don't you? To reduce that fear.
Yeah, we're glad, and we're glad to have you here. I understand it's early in the morning. We wanted to get you earlier, but we wanted to respect your your time zone.
Anyway.
yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to have you here. So you heard, you've been watching backstage about Mark's comments about nuclear waste. That it's an issue that's been blown out of proportion. So I asked Mark further questions about it. Is nuclear waste, hang on, where are we? Okay, so I asked Mark if nuclear waste is huge problems and should we sorry, I'm a bit distracted. So I'm fascinated about Mark's idea about thinking of nuclear waste as not as a money sink, because people think you have to spend money to manage nuclear waste. But he has a different idea. Why don't you earn money from nuclear waste? So let's hear it from Mark. And it's open to the public. They make money from the public for it. It's amazing.
Not yet, because they haven't quite opened yet. I got a special little pre-opening tour a few days ago. Yeah, but they will. They've already had lots of school groups visit, and the children draw pictures and they say thank you. And anyway, it's entirely good vibes. It's the way you have to handle nuclear waste. And and it's cheap as hell compared to the power that you're getting from each fuel rod. It's just wildly different than the waste from coal or the waste from natural gas, which is CO2, of course. Heck, even the waste from solar and wind it takes an immense logistics network to build solar and wind. Think about it. It takes exactly that network to disassemble solar and wind.
Yes. But proponents would say solar is recyclable, but so are plastic bags, but plastic bags are not being recycled.
They're nearly worthless.
Because of that.
Solar panels, if the solar panels are worth it to recycle, they're probably toxic, as in heavy metals and stuff that are worth it to recycle. If the solar panels are less toxic, then they're probably kind of worthless, and they're just going to be turned into, like, I don't know, cement or.
In case you missed what he was talking about, he visited a waste facility in the Netherlands, I believe. So he visited this facility that's been turned into a museum. What they had nuclear waste inside. They stored it inside. They made it on display. They had labs inside this museum, and they brought children to visit. The idea is to bring children and charge admissions tickets for it. But now schools have already lined up to bring children to visit nuclear waste, this nuclear waste museum where they store the waste and they turn it into a museum. And so instead of spending government money, public money to manage nuclear waste, now this money can also come from the public. I think that's a refreshing idea. I want to ask Bong, do you think that's something that we could do in Malaysia? Turn it into a museum?
Yeah.
So you like that idea?
Yeah, I like that idea because, I mean, a lot of people are scared of nuclear. I mean, like what Mary has said, people are probably afraid of nuclear when they do not know and they do not understand what it is about. So by doing what Mark has said, it has proven. I mean, you keep children there. Visiting the waste, everything, and you have events there. Probably you have art there. You have parents. You have schools going there. Then people will just learn about it. The nuclear waste is not really as what the tabloids or what like what you have said just now. It has been blown out of proportion. So yeah, we should really do that. I mean, that is the approach that we should do to engage the public, so that we have to change their perception totally. Totally, we should not keep all these waste. If it is, I mean, if it is true that it is not that dangerous, that it should be kept away from the public, then why not? Why not? Like what Mark has said, we just let people come and visit, to learn about it. Then people will really know that it is really, really safe, and a lot of work has been carried out, done to make sure it is safe for I mean, for the management of the waste. Yes.
So, Marie, would you, if such a facility was available in somewhere near you, would you consider sending your children, taking them for a visit of this nuclear waste museum? Would that be something of interest?
Yeah, definitely. Sounds really interesting. Yeah.
So there is a market for it, really. So there is a market. It's not just theoretical. There are people who are willing. Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
that's
if it could
interesting.
be a kind of
Curious, right?
education centre, then why not?
Okay. So moving on, I want to talk about environmentalism a little. So I want to show this slide. Can we put my slide on the page? Before that, let's address this. People think that the government, the public, is going to have to pay a lot to manage nuclear waste, but actually, nuclear waste and the decommissioning of a nuclear power plant 80 years from now is already factored into the cost of a nuclear power plant. So if you look here, the fuel cycle, which makes up 20% of the overall cost of a nuclear power plant, when we declare the price of a nuclear power plant, let's say $5 billion US dollars, for example, it already includes waste management. That is this 5% back-end activities. The rest are mining uranium, conversion, enriching it, making it into fuel, and 5% is already factored into back-end activities, which is, in layman's term, is managing the nuclear waste. So it's not really you're using public money, because the utility, your nuclear power plant, has already included that in their bid. And also the decommissioning, it depends on how long you run your reactor. The longer you run, the decommissioning, the fraction of the cost is just 1%. The shorter you run, if you run only 40 years and then your government asks you to close down, that will reflect 5% of the total overall cost. So the issue of the public having to spend more money to manage nuclear waste, it's actually not true, because this is the standard that the IEA has asked all participating countries to do, and this has been done for about 20 years now. So moving on, land that is required to match a 1,000 megawatt output of nuclear, gas, or coal. So I want to ask Bong, for example. I do want to ask you: is land valuable in Malaysia? Do you think our forests, our rainforests, and our tropical jungles, do they have value in the eyes of Malaysians? Because as a political party, I personally would expect politicians to fight to defend our forests from being chopped off. And the problem with dilute sources of energy like wind and solar and even hydro is that they take up so much land. So do you think Malaysians should value our forests?
Yes, definitely. I mean, people are starting to, over the years, education and everything, I mean, people start to understand that we should have keep our forest reserve. We should plant as many trees as possible. We shouldn't chop trees. And Malaysia is very lucky that we actually have so much. We have a big piece of land. We have Sarawak and Sabah. Then we have Semenanjung, Malaysia. Then we have big piece of forest that we should keep. So we should try our best to not chop down any more trees for development. Or for energy purposes, when we can consider other better alternative to do it, to get the same amount of electricity. The cost, how do we put the cost on the forest that we have chopped down? That is not what something people has, a lot of people have been talking about. So yeah, like what you have shown just now on your slide, to put all those renewable energies like solar, hydro, you will need a big tract of land to be chopped down compared to if you consider nuclear plant, which is more efficient. Yeah, why not? Why don't we consider that? I mean, if we are considering solar, if we are doing hydro dam, then why not we consider nuclear when we can get away from all that? Definitely, I mean, for Malaysia, forest is something very valuable for us. I think as a party, we also committed to that cause. We will support. I mean, we will not support deforestation. Of course, we will support to have more trees, to have more greeneries. I mean, we do have other policies where we are looking at mobility. We try to not have so many, like we are chopping down so many trees or land. We are cutting down so many trees just to put up highways, just to put up more shopping complex, to build parking these. I mean, to put car parks, which most of the time you don't use it. It's a waste of land. It's a waste of space. So there has to be a change in our mindset in that sense. We have to preserve our forests for our future generation. Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm really glad to hear that. So it seems that people are mistaking green energy. That they think it's fine to replace green forests with green energy, and I find that sad. And I'm glad you actually recognize that we should do both. We should do green energy, and also we should keep our green forests around. I'm glad to hear that. So I want to move on to this crisis in the United Kingdom, the energy crisis. So I want to put up this slide. I'll introduce it. So during the past month or so, or the past 2 weeks or so, the UK has been facing an energy crisis somewhat. I'm not sure if it has translated to the retail side. Our consumers, domestic consumers, are feeling the crunch. But these kinds of headlines, they haven't appeared in 10 or 20 years. Nowhere in the world have we really looked at, has these ever made into the headlines. But now it's all over the place that people are blaming, the renewables advocates are blaming fossil fuels advocates. The fossil fuel industry are blaming renewables for the energy crisis, and people are saying that this energy crisis, no one saw it coming. Is that really true? Bong, is this true for you, that energy crisis due to unreliable supply, is it really unpredictable? Do you think so?
I don't think
It's
so.
okay
I
if you
mean,
don't.
if I'm one thing is okay. The climate change has affected a lot of. To a certain degree, the predictability of the supply. I mean, for in this case, the wind farms, it obviously have to rely on winds to power up their power plants. Probably then they couldn't really predict that. But then again, it shows the problem of renewable energy. You are so dependent on something like wind, which you totally cannot predict the pattern. In this case, then when the grid is down, you have to rely on the next better solution to put it. I mean, to put up the grid again, which is gas and fossil fuel. So yeah, I mean, if you want to say that it is not predictable, it is hard to predict, then the more we should get away from relying on this renewable energy like wind or even solar. I mean, in Malaysia recently, probably I do not know about Malaysia. I'm doing projects in Kalimantan. My sites, we have more rains recently. I mean, we can't do much because the water level coming up, then the rain being more. I mean, the intensity of the rain has been more compared to years before. So probably we should take that into account. Why? I mean, if in Malaysia we consider solar farm, then we will probably have the same problem. Probably the whole year, probably we only get a good sun for our solar farm. in a certain month. So that level of unpredictability is not good for us in the long term. I mean, if we want to maintain our power generation, that's
Yeah.
the whole thing is the whole thing just proven that we cannot rely too much on renewable energy because it is not predictable. The level of predictability and reliability is just not there.
Yeah,
And
and
we
it's
will
also
go back to the
yeah, and it's also because it- when it goes down, for example, solar, when it goes down everywhere. It doesn't go down only in
yes,
one place. So if
yes,
you and your neighbor countries all have solar and you have gas powered backups, when your solar goes down, every country that relies on solar, they now have to fire their gas plants, and when they fire their gas plants, they need the gas, and therefore the gas prices become expensive because everybody is competing for
true,
this gas. So this is one of the causes of the UK energy crisis, where they are currently well, they're everywhere. They're trying to obtain gas at higher prices. Then they charge the consumers. The consumers, not only they have to pay higher rents to the banks and mortgage price cars, and also now they have to also consider energy, which is crippling. So I asked Mark about this. I asked Mark about the UK energy crisis. Let's hear what he have to say.
Something else happened. I saw people that I thought I respected, that I thought I should be able to trust, PhDs from MIT, from Stanford, proposing things that were just completely bonkers, idiotic even. I mean, they were proposing them with great complexity, with great detail, with serious tones of voice in peer-reviewed journals. They are proposing things that, just from a engineering point of view, from a basic common sense point of view, completely bonkers, and in my opinion, exceptionally dangerous. When I was over in the United Kingdom, I saw countries advancing towards awful problems. I mean, I couldn't have predicted that in 2021 it would all come to a head the way we're seeing it. I could not have said, in 2012 and 13 when I started grad school, oh, by the way, in 8 years it's all going to fall apart. No. However,
Nobody.
It felt bad. It felt really bad. As Rudy.
Yeah, so that's Mark's comments about the unpredictability, that people have been proposing ideas that engineers should have figured out a long time ago. Well, Mark didn't figure out a long time ago because he's not involved in making sure the grid is reliable. But grid operators have predicted this actually a long time ago. So it's not just an issue that's specific to the UK, because, as you know, Germany is a champion of renewables. So the thing is, Germany has made it their national agenda to mitigate climate change, and they've decided to do it with renewable energy. And I'm sure you know about this too, Marie, that Germany is always being repeated as the hero of the environment. So I asked Mark about this, if Germany is a great example of mitigating climate change. So let's hear it from Mark. People look up to Germany. They think Germany is a success story in terms of mitigating climate change through the use of renewables. Is there any truth in that? Are they really heroes of the environment?
They have done a little bit of the easy part at great cost. In other words, what Germany's done is they've taken about 60% of their electricity that used to come from nuclear. They replaced it with fossil fuels. And then over the past 5 or 6 years, they've slowly replaced that with coal and gas. Or sorry, they've replaced that extra coal and gas with wind and solar, right? So at the moment, they appear to be a little bit cleaner than they were 8 years ago, just a bit. They appear to be a lot cleaner than they were 7 or 6 years ago, where their emissions peaked after the closure of their after their nuclear plants. But this apparent success has hidden some extremely serious problems. One, they're barely building wind and solar anymore. I mean, they're building more solar, but it's barely adding any extra solar energy, partly because it all comes at the same time, partly because it's being added in marginal locations, partly it's because all the other solar panels they've been adding for 20 years are starting to age. So they have to add more and more solar just to keep the same level of production of solar.
Right.
That's one thing. And even though they've been benefiting from cheaper and cheaper Chinese solar panels for a number of years, that's turning around this year. So any solar they add is going to be more expensive than it was before. I have friends in solar who say, oh, no, that's just a little blip. Yeah, but sometimes little blips aren't little blips. They're the future. So if somehow we straighten out the supply chains and we go back to extremely cheap, bulk-built Chinese solar panels going to Germany, then maybe we'll see price declines continue, but that won't necessarily lead to more solar.
So I asked Mark about questions about what's happening in France and Germany because it's something that we, Malaysia, is moving in one of these directions, that what are the risks that we face? So I want to show this slide about the situation in France and Germany. So I want to explain this a little bit. So Germany, that brown country, is one of the brownest grids in Europe. They produce about 318 grams of carbon dioxide per unit of electricity that they produce. So that's a lot. And because they use a lot of electricity, therefore, this number is multiplied by the amount of energy they consume. And they are powered by coal, by nuclear, biomass, coal, wind, solar, and hydro, and natural gas. So their neighbor, which is France, they're powered mostly by nuclear, and you can see their carbon intensity is a mere 59 grams per unit of electricity used. That's just a fraction of what Germany has been able to achieve. France is one of the greenest grids in Europe, and you can see that they're mostly powered by nuclear and hydro. The thing that I want the audience to see is that solar and wind, this is the amount that you have installed. And this is the amount of power that you are currently extracting. This is at 2 p.m. in the summer. This is because solar, even though it's daytime, it also very dependent on the climate, on the weather, on the clouds. So when you don't have clouds, all this money that you have spent to install, they're not actually producing electricity. And this is not just for 2 p.m. You can go to this website and you can check it for yourself. You just click on Germany and just click on the times. So you can see the amount of carbon that Germany produces compared to its neighboring countries like Norway, Sweden, and France. France and Sweden, they're mostly powered by nuclear. Norway is mostly powered by hydro. So this reflects on the question, is really Germany a hero of the environment? Are they really succeeding in mitigating climate change through their investments in renewables? Let's compare that with their investments in renewables, compare that with France. Well, France has produced very, very little emission from the same electricity that they consume. So I ask Mark again, what other things are interesting about Germany's CO2 mitigation efforts? Let's hear. So Germany imports nuclear energy from France.
Oh, yes. And I mean, the net balance in Germany doesn't really tell the whole story, because Germany does things where they send power out this way, bring in power this way, but it only works if they can bring in power that comes from steady supply. And in the case of France, that's going to be coming from nuclear plants.
So we see that even though Germany, they've decided to shut down their nuclear plants, and they know that they are having a troublesome grid, and they're so proud to say that we're only powered by renewables, but they are also importing a lot of green electricity from France. And it shows a little bit of hypocrisy that you can show a cleaner grid. You don't have nuclear power plants, but you still use nuclear electricity. And it's interesting for us to observe, because in Malaysia, if we decide to go the path that Germany has taken, would we be able to benefit from, are we expecting to benefit from nuclear electricity from our neighbors? Because that's, for me, that's a little bit of hypocrisy. But the thing with France is, although they are mostly powered by nuclear, and you can see the success that they have been able to display, they are under political pressure to deploy more renewables by the public, because the public thinks renewables is the solution. So I asked Mark to talk about this. Let's hear it from Mark.
What they say, they put out reports saying how important it was to spend more on the grid so you could have more renewables, and how France was falling behind in renewables. France already had decarbonized electricity. Why was the grid operator? And then you realize, they sold the grid. The grid operator wants more grid investments. And then you look at the price of French electricity, it's just skyrocketing.
So we can see that the grid operator, because you can make a lot of money from the grid when you have wind and solar, because there are a lot of investments that can come into your grid. People want smart grids, and that's a lot of money for the grid operators. It's a lot of money to the shareholders, to the employees, a lot of things they can do with it. So wind and solar is very, very attractive for utilities around the world. It gives them a lot of relevance. And the thing is, we can see this conflict between France and Germany, Bong, that we've chosen a path, our previous government and our current government, our previous Pakatan Harapan government and our current Perikatan Nasional government. They are both for further deployment of renewable energy. Are you worried about that, Bong? Are you proud of that, or are you worried about that we're going to follow the path of Germany?
Yeah, I'm worried about that if they do that without, proper consultation, proper engagement with the public, and without looking at the data, or without even looking at the example of Germany and France. We can't be deploying renewable energy just because the public wants it, because sometimes we have to educate the public. We have to let them know, and we have to give out all these examples. We have to show all this, like what have you shown just now, what Germany has done, what France has done, and the figures just proven that what Germany has done is totally opposite of what they intended to do. They deploy more renewable energies, and they're actually contributing to more pollution. Is that what we want to do? End of the day, if we want to solve climate change, we want to have reliable base load power generation, then we have to consider nuclear energy, and not just just renewables. I'm worried if the government is not looking at it objectively. I think as a leader of the people, as a politician, you have to be honest. You have to let people make their informed decision. You have to put everything on the table, not rejected it outright based on your own bias. You have to procure all the information, put it out all there, let people discuss, let people debate. We have something like this. We have talks like this. You can invite people who are pro-nuclear, or anti-nuclear, or people that are clueless about nuclear, so that we have a proper discussion. Then, by end of the day, we do something with proper information, proper data, and proper guidance from all that. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Bong. I'm glad to hear that. And Marie, you've joined a lot of ground level movements, like your activism with Extinction Rebellion, was it? You've attended some of their activities, and you're trying. What do you think is the popular opinion of the British people from your activities, from your engagements? How do the British people view nuclear now in 2021?
I haven't seen any opinion polls or anything for a long time, but
what about from your own experience?
I think the opinion is changing, but that might be skewed because I'll talk to family and friends, and if you just give a little bit of information here and there, which sort of contradicts the sort of mainstream narrative, people do slowly come round, and it seems to be different things work for different people. So, yeah, I like to think that it's changing and that people are sort of opening their minds a bit more to nuclear energy.
Has the increase in electricity prices reached your level, the house domestic level? Have you felt it?
Not yet, but I'm staying with my mum at the moment. She had a phone call from Octopus Energy saying we're about to raise the tariffs. So
Right.
everybody, it's on everybody's mind. And then there was something to do with petrol yesterday, but
Yeah, because I am aware of your energy plans, because some of them you book your electricity with a company for a year, and then and then you change your supplier, and so it might take time for that for the energy crisis to reach the domestic level. But they've already been in touch with you, trying to get your agreement to raise the prices. Yes, so it's kind of reaching the public.
It's actually when it hits. When people are affected personally, they'll pay attention, won't they?
Yes. Okay. I want to show this slide. It's about Germany. You know how Germany is very anti-nuclear. So it seems that is kind of changing. So a survey done in Germany, whether they're happy for nuclear to be deployed in Europe, you see the supporters for nuclear power has remained somewhat consistent at 50%. But the people who oppose nuclear power, just this year, just in the summer, when all this when this energy crisis is happening across Europe, you see that the opposition to nuclear has actually reduced quite significantly. It started really, really close in the early summer, and the opposition has really, really reduced now. I mean, in September, and we see that most of the people who support nuclear energy in Europe are the younger generation, followed by the oldest generation. So this is an interesting development, and it's not alone, because in Singapore, through a survey done by Young's Survey by Nuclear Business Platform, they surveyed the youth. And 60% of the youth in Singapore, remember, Singapore is a very small country. It's the size of Bakun Energy, as we've just learned earlier today. So it seems 60% of the youth in Singapore said Singapore should consider adopting nuclear as part of its energy mix. So I want to ask Bong, well, I'm sure this is the first time you've seen this seen this presentation. So does that surprise you, or is this expected that people in Singapore would support nuclear power? Or does it surprise you at all?
Yeah, that surprised me a bit, because when people talk about nuclear, then when it happens, shit happens, then the size of the country probably will affected even more. I mean, to see the support for nuclear energy to be included in the energy mix is just encouraging. Probably we should do the same for Malaysia. Are you aware of any survey or anything similar done in Malaysia? Probably we should do that as well to get the real sentiment. I mean, the real whether the young people in Malaysia support nuclear energy or not. Probably
maybe things have changed. Maybe things have changed, and the government is acting based on outdated information. That could be a possibility. And I think yes, I agree with you that perhaps we should do such a survey in Malaysia, see if the opinion has changed, especially among the youth. Because when we talk about nuclear, it's actually their future that we're thinking about, because the plant would last 80, 90 years, and it will be actually for them, not just for us. So
and I believe young people are more open to ideas, and they are actually out there to research on all these the renewable energies, nuclear energy, everything, and compare it themselves. I mean, it is so easy now on YouTube, on the internet, for them to learn, and probably that would help them to come to a better informed decision. That's why they support nuclear energy. It's not surprising if that is what has happened in Singapore.
You're right. I mean, Yeah, I think we definitely should start to talk to the public again, let the government talk to the public again, whether we should continue on our path that has been set by the two previous government, one previous government, one current government, and whether people still think it's the right thing to do. Anyway, so I want to move on to this slide. Let's show this slide on the screen. So environmentalists, one of the concerns, I'm sure, as an environmentalist myself, you can see that we require a lot of materials to deploy alternative energy to our current baseload, our current fossil fuel energy mix. But if you see from this, we seem to think that solar, PV, hydro, wind, and geothermal, the materials for it just come magically appear in the factories. But the truth is they require a lot of mining for them, and we have had to open a lot of open pit mines. But still, the world is still investing in more mines. And as an environmentalist, I'm really concerned about this. So, Bong, have you seen this slide before?
No, I've not seen this, but I am aware of the fact that people do not compare it objectively when they look at solar, hydro, wind, and other things compared to nuclear. And probably this part of it where they have to mine the materials, the fuel for the energy source, not being compared, not being discussed even.
Yeah, because nuclear power plants, they're not small, they're huge. And solar panels, they're so small they can fit on your roof. But to produce the same amount of power, the amount of materials that you need to have to deploy just the equivalent amount of power, assuming it's daytime all the time, this is the result. And when I first saw this chart, I was livid. I was it just didn't make sense to me anymore to pursue this kind of technology to provide a means to mitigate climate change, because these materials, the energy is renewable, but the material is not renewable. They're still limited.
Yes.
So, and also moving on to EV, because this is also one of the science party, what they want, what you want to deploy. I'll explain this chart a bit. So this is your conventional car. A lot of your emissions come from your tailpipe. So this is the smoke. This is basically the fuel, and you exhaust it in your tailpipe. This is how to manufacture the car, the fuel cycle when you manufacture the car, and this is other manufacturing that relates to the car. So this is your conventional car. But for electric cars, you only need you use some for your fuel cycle. Your other manufacturing, the purple ones, are the same with every technology, because you're building a car. But now you've introduced the materials the emissions related to the production of materials to deploy your batteries. So it looks like EVs, they are quite variable. They don't necessarily would solve climate your emissions problems, because what's the difference between all this is the orange part. The orange part is basically, because it's EV, it's your electricity from the grid. If you have a clean grid like France and Norway, then you can say your emissions is lower than a conventional combustion engine vehicle. But if your grid is dirty like Germany, then what's the benefit of switching from conventional vehicles to electric vehicles? Would you agree to that, Bong?
Yes. This the dubious comparison people make when they just go for EV. EV is green because it will not produce, emission, and but to power the EV itself, the grid is not even green. So then, when you compare it in totality, it is not really green. So when we when we try to make such a comparison, we have to be objective. We have to look at the whole picture. We have to look at the source of the material, how we obtain them, whether like you have shown just now, the open pit thing, the mining, then whether the grid is green, whether the grid is powered by solar, coal, gas, or nuclear. And this slide is just fantastic. This slide just shows that if your source is not green, whatever that you put out there, I mean, the EV vehicles that you put out there, it can't be said as green. That is the truth. I mean, probably a lot of people do not know this. They will look at it independently. They will just say the EV is green. Yeah, but to power the energy source for that EV in the first place, it has to be green. If it's not green, then it's dirty, right?
Yeah.
That's the argument
Yeah.
I think we have in Sarawak actually, when they are looking into hydrogen as the energy source to power up their, I mean, the one of the energy source that they are looking into. Yep.
Am I still around? Yes. Sorry, I think
Yes,
I
yes.
had a internet connection problem. So okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's a very fair comment. I want to go to this slide. Yes, so this one. So we have a statement from a Canadian minister that says, we have not seen a model where we can get to net zero emissions by 2050 without nuclear. The fact of the matter is that it produces zero emissions. That's the statement from Canadian Minister of Natural Resources. We have one of our popular ministers, and a Minister of Energy and Environment. She said that in Malaysia, she said this in 2018, there are many other renewable energy solutions offering this. Nuclear is obsolete. We have biomass, biogas, and solar energy. So I want to ask you, Bong, does Pakatan Harapan and the current government, perhaps they have a more advanced model than the Canadian government? Because the Canadian government said they couldn't find a model where you can get to net zero without nuclear, while our government thinks that it's obsolete. So what do you think?
I have to agree with the Canadian Natural Resources Minister and disagree with Yobi in there. I mean, yes, we do have alternative like solar and some other things that she has mentioned, but we do not have the similar amount of energy that we can produce to compare to nuclear energy. How can she say nuclear is obsolete when you can't even replace the coal or gas powered power plants using all this renewable energy where we have talked just now? I mean, based on the capacity factor, based on the efficiency, based on the predictability, it shows that renewable energy just cannot compete with something like nuclear energy. So there's, I mean, I totally do not agree with her statement there. We have biomass, yes, we have biomass, we have biogas and solar energy, but then probably in the most advanced model that we can do, even Thailand. I mean, among our peers, among neighboring countries, I think Thailand has done very good and very well in this area. I mean, renewable energy. They're only looking at 15% of their energy generation based on renewable energy. So how are we going to tackle the balance 85%? If we are not looking into nuclear energy, what are the alternatives? I would like to know what are the alternatives actually. If I mean, the reporter should have just asked, we have biomass, we have biogas, we have solar energy, but that those energies that she has mentioned can cater up to what level of electric generation for Malaysia?
Yeah, so you don't think they have a
Yeah.
more advanced model than the Canadians?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
All right.
I mean,
So
yeah.
okay. So one of the reasons that is so critical is because of this, that we need to do it as quickly as possible. We need to reduce our carbon emissions as quickly as possible. And we can see that in the past, within 10 years, most countries, they decarbonize their electricity sectors with a hydro and nuclear. And the quickest we could deploy renewables as we can see from here, within 10 years, they are so slow compared to nuclear and renewables. It's because nuclear is scalable. It doesn't really depend on your environment, and this is one of the reasons why the Canadian minister said that we can't see a model where we can reach net zero by 2050 because we need that target. We need that 2050 target. We might be able to do it with renewables, but perhaps not within 30 years. However, we want to because of all the other issues. So let's get Marie. She's still here. So Marie, you had a comment about forests.
Yeah.
What would?
When my children were in primary school, sort of 6 years old, they learn about the Borneo rainforests, sort of held up as a sort of trophy for around the world.
Yeah, right.
So the idea of deploying mass scale renewables would completely conflict with the sentiment of wanting to preserve what they call the lungs of the earth, So,
yeah. Did you know that, Bong?
Just don't go with more renewables.
Yeah.
Did you know that they're called the lungs of the world?
I thought that would be Amazon. No.
The Amazon and
it's one of
any rain. The Borneo is a rainforest, isn't it, as well?
Yes, so, yes, it is. Yes,
of course. Yes.
Yeah. So that message is for you, Bong. Make sure that you don't. If you're ever in power.
If I ever in the place to make change, sure. Yeah. I will oppose any effort to cut down more forests in this place.
Yeah, and as a potential political leader in Malaysia, we hope that you could bring these ideas forward when you are granted that kind of power. And in fact, Mark actually has a message for the political leaders of Malaysia, future political leaders of Malaysia. Let's hear it from Mark.
Light of world attention, including anti-nuclear attention, to shine on Malaysia. Are you ready for a real challenge? Are you ready to provide? These nuclear plants provide for 100 years. Are you ready for century-long commitments?
That's
and
political leadership.
Yourself, this is scary. This is not something to be undertaken lightly. As Rudy, if you ask yourself, your fellows that put on this event, your colleagues who may be watching, your family, your friends, are you ready for that? If so, the world is ready to help you build nuclear.
Yeah, so Mark has put you to a challenge, Bong. Well, you and Arveent and every political leader who's watching this stream right now. So, what do you say to that? How would you?
Yeah. It's easier to do nothing, right? Just follow keep the status quo, follow the whatever that has been done, not exploring new options. But that's not what we are here for. My party, Parti Aspirasi Sains Malaysia, has proven. So far, although we are not registered yet, so far we have make it clear to the public that we are for things that are different. We will do things unconventionally, but we will still we will still be backed by data, by evidence, by fact and figures before we come to a decision. So, it is probably a very difficult stand for us. I am not aware of any political party in Malaysia openly calling for nuclear energy to be included in the energy mix. Although, probably the previous government who set up MNPC to put up studies into our Malaysia's readiness for nuclear energy. But apart from that, that we have not seen any real political will to even talk about nuclear energy openly, to bring up that level of discussion. All the discussion that I have seen is mostly done by people like you, as Rudy, or some enthusiasts or people that are in the industry. But we have not seen that level of engagement from the government itself. The previous government or the current government. So probably we should have more young leaders, especially new parties that will take up this challenge. I mean, even whatever that Mark has said, are we here just for the next 3 to 5 years, or are we here for our future generation? We have to look at our plan for the next 60, 100 years even. So that's what we aim for. I mean, I hope that my colleagues in the party and members of the party do have the same ambition and share our mission to do that and support us, and of course correct us when we are wrong. Yeah, I mean, I am definitely for the challenge. I'm up for the challenge by Mark, and I hope all the people that are listening, I mean, young leaders or other politicians that are listening, also take that into consideration. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So if you look at historically, we've pushed for nuclear power from the top to bottom, from the government, and we forced the public to accept it. But now we've seen movements like Women Mothers for Nuclear. They are starting from the ground up, where like critical mass as well. We're trying to approach the public because we don't want a change in government to cripple a national initiative. So we see these groups mushrooming out from all over the world, a ground up movement, where we want to introduce public pressure so that whatever government comes into the picture, you need to be able to appease the people. And this is part of critical mass, and this is what Women for Nuclear, Mothers for Nuclear is for. Also, that's why they have started this movement all around the world as well. So Marie, I would like to ask you, what could you tell us more about Mothers for Nuclear? Do you have anything else to add that we've already discussed earlier?
No, I mean, there's just so much work to be done in trying to
yeah, because a lot of people still need to hear this message, and you're working.
I don't know where to start, really. I don't know. There's, I mean, just getting this scientific, the academics who a lot of them are funded by fossil fuel interests, so we're up against that as well, and then as well as the kind of people that in the green movement who have been fed the anti-nuclear narrative that for historical reasons probably before the climate change issue. So yeah, it's there's a lot of work.
I know, because you wrote me in to sign that letter to the universities to ask for the for the universities to make a statement about this. Yes, and thank you. Yeah, I happily signed that document as well. And yeah, you're right. It's a David against Goliath movement, because the what we're fighting against, they're very, very well funded. Nuclear industry, we're not getting paid for any of this.
No, exactly. I think there's this kind of idea that the nuclear industry has money to throw at public engagement, and it really doesn't.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for that, because it really puts into perspective the fight that we're in, because we're just ground movements. We're not funded by big organizations or anything. So for the public, this has been the end of our session with our politicians, with our political movements, ground movements, our aspiring political parties like Arveent, Bong, and we have Marie with us as well here. This is the end of our collaboration with Stand Up for Nuclear in the month of September for 2021. We hope we engage with them again. But this is not the end of critical mass. We will have more programs for you in the future. We'll keep up with the social media. We'll provide more information throughout the coming months. If any of you out there who would like to join this movement, please drop us a message on Facebook. We have an Instagram. We also have a Twitter account, and we need as many people to join us as possible. You don't have to understand nuclear energy. You just have to want a cleaner future. And with that, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we'll be on Clubhouse on Thursday, 30th of September at 9 p.m. Malaysia, where if you want to engage more with us, with the team, with the Critical Mass team, or with some of our speakers who will also be there, please join us on Clubhouse. It's an app for your phone, and you just install it. If you need invites, drop us a message on Facebook. And with that, thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Bong. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Azrudi. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.